All right, this is a video that's going to show you a variety of different pieces of lab equipment that you're going to come in contact with in chemistry. And when you are doing a lab, you do need to know which piece of a lab equipment that you need to take down off the shelf. So you do need to identify each of the pieces of lab equipment in this PowerPoint and be able to use them properly in lab. So the first piece of lab equipment that we're going to look at is a beaker. This is a beaker, and it's different than some other containers in the fact that it has straight up and down sides. So it kind of looks like a regular glass, except it's got a little spout on it for being able to pour. Beakers hold solids or liquids that will not release gas when they are reacted and will not splatter if you're stirring them. It is a typical container that we use to carry solutions or chemicals from one point to another and to hold them while we're getting ready to properly measure them. Even though there's numbers on the outside, those are just rough estimate numbers on this beaker. This device is not used to measure the volume of a substance. The sides are straight up and down. All right, that is compared to this item. This item is called an Erlenmeyer flask. And a flask is something that will hold liquids that might release gases during a reaction and are more likely to splatter. Its design that is narrower at the top than the bottom makes it to where you can hold the neck of the flask to swirl your solution, and it also has the ability to insert a stopper either for safe storage or a stopper that has a tube in it, a glass tube, to be able to collect the gases that are being produced in the reaction. This is a Florence flask, and although we will not be using a Florence flask in Chem 1, it is used for mixing chemicals. It's got a longer, narrow neck that prevents the splash exposure. This mostly is just showing you that there's more than one kind of flask. That's why you can't call the other thing just a flask, and we'll call it an Erlenmeyer flask. All right, this item is one of the most important and most used items that we'll be having, because although flasks also have numbers on their sides, those numbers are just rough estimates. This container is a graduated cylinder, and a graduated cylinder is used to measure the volumes of liquids. It's the only device that you will be using in the lab to measure the volume of your liquid. So although you might get it off the shelf and pour it into a beaker for temporary use, you will use a flask or a beaker to conduct the experiment in, but you will use a graduated cylinder to accurately measure the volume. These numbers are correct on the outside of the container. You might conduct an experiment in one of these. This is a test tube, and a test tube is a thin glass tube. It's closed on one end, it's open on the other, and you will be able to put a stopper in there if necessary, and it holds small amounts of material for laboratory testing and experimentation. This is a test tube holder. You use your hand and push together the two sides, and it opens up the end and will hold a test tube. Now your hand is also a test tube holder. The only time you would use this test tube holder is if the test tube is too hot to pick up with your hand. So if you're not heating a test tube up, you don't use a test tube holder, you just use your hand. These are test tube brushes or bottle brushes, and test tube brushes are often used to clean not only test tubes and graduated cylinders, they could also be used to clean out your beaker. Please be careful If you try to force a larger brush into a smaller tube, you can break the test tube and injure yourself with the force of pushing in the brush. So make sure you're using the appropriate brush for the test tube you are trying to clean out. This is a test tube rack. Now they come in a couple different varieties, and you have several in your lab area. These two you specifically have. That depends on what size test tube you're using, which rack you'll use, and it also depends on whether the test tubes you're using are heated. If you're heating up a test tube, you're going to want to use the wooden rack because the plastic ones sometimes will melt in contact with your very hot test tube. So test tube racks are used for holding and organizing tubes in the laboratory. These are a variety of different types of rubber stoppers. A rubber stopper is used to close the container to avoid spillage or contamination for storage. A container should never be heated if there's a stopper in place. So never heat up a container that has a solid stopper in it. These are well plates or spot plates. It is used when you want to perform many small scale reactions at one time and look at them for comparison. We use these many times during the year. And you have also not only plastic ones in your container, but you do have a ceramic one that has a tendency to stain less. This is a watch glass, and a watch glass is used to hold a small amount of a solid, and such as the products of a reaction. So you can hold your results in this watch glass. This is a glass stir rod. The glass stir rod is used to manually stir a solution, and it could also be used to transfer a single drop of a solution. You dip it into the solution and then one drop will come off of the stir rod. But most commonly it is used to stir. These are both different types of droppers, medicine or eye droppers. So there's a glass one that has a plastic bulb on the end. The plastic bulb is able to be removed, and it's used to transfer a small volume of a liquid. A pipette also can be used to do that. And the difference is a pipette has an incorporated bulb. It's all one unit, and you can't take it apart. So you can't use this if you're using a variety of different chemicals. It's only one pipette per chemical because you can't take the bulb off to clean out the dropper in this case. So we usually have these labeled, and we have to be careful not to cross-contaminate. Never touch the bottom part, the end of the dropper or the pipette to your reaction. So on the top of your medicine dropper, that rubber bulb comes off for you to be able to clean it. This is litmus paper. Litmus paper comes in red or blue. Red litmus paper is used to identify bases, and blue is used to identify acids. And we'll get more into that when we talk about acids and bases. These are tweezers or forceps, and they are used to pick up small objects in the lab or separate items. This is a funnel, and a funnel is used to aid in the transfer of liquid from one vessel to another, typically speaking when you have an item that has a small opening that you want to put your solution into. These are weigh boats. Weigh boats are used to weigh solids that will be transferred to another vessel. Also, it keeps the balance or your scale free of chemical spills. So you use the weigh boat, you put the item into the weigh boat. You have to make sure that you zero out the scale once you put the weigh boat on, or take into consideration the weight of the boat in your experiment. So be careful that you don't just add the chemical item in there and not subtract away the mass of the weigh boat. These are scopulas or spatulas. They're used to dispense solid chemicals from their containers. Sometimes they're used to stir items or scrape things off of the sides of stuff. They should never be used as um, a scraping tool in hot things. So don't use it to scrape something off your top of your hot plate. Chemicals should never be transferred with your bare hands, so you use a scoopula. These are beaker tongs. Beaker tongs are used to remove a beaker that's hot or an empty hot beaker, whether it's got stuff in it or not. If you don't have a hot beaker, your hand is what you use to carry a beaker. This is a Bunsen burner. A Bunsen burner is used to heat non-volatile liquids and solids. You hook up a hose and it connects to your gas line, and we'll be using these frequently. This is an evaporating dish. They also come in a little metal tray variety. They're less breakable. The evaporating dish is used for heating of stable solid compounds. We typically use that when we're dehydrating something. This is crucible tongs. Crucible tongs are for handling hot crucibles or picking up your evaporating dish or other hot objects. They are not to be used to pick up beakers. They don't have the right end. You can see how you have to pick up something with a crucible tong by the lip. You don't pick it up around the item. This is a ring stand and their components. There's a variety of different components that go on the ring stand, and even though the ring stand doesn't have a ring on it every time, sometimes it has a clamp on it, we still call it a ring stand. So this is a ring and a stand. The ring is this loop that is holding up this wire gauze, but there's a lot of other components that you can use your ring stand for. So ring stands are a safe and convenient way to perform a reaction that requires heating with a Bunsen burner. So this is the ring, iron ring, that is used. You attach it to your ring stand and then you put a wire mesh on the top of that. Iron rings connect a ring, makes a platform for you to put your beaker on, and then underneath it you'd put your Bunsen burner. So this is the wire mesh or the wire gauze. It sits on the iron ring and provides a stand for your beaker. This is a utility clamp. A utility clamp is used to secure test tubes, or it's used to keep the cords from your Logger Pro out of the way. It also can be used to secure a burette to your ring stand. This is a lab apron. It's partial protection against chemical spills and potential stains. We wear this in our lab whenever we're working with any chemicals or anything that we are heating. This is a fire extinguisher, and the fire extinguisher is a portable device that discharges a jet of water, foam, or gas, or other material to extinguish a fire. This is a fire blanket. A fire blanket is a piece of fire-resistant material such as fiberglass used in smothering a fire. We have one over on the wall behind my desk by the goggle sterilization kit. So stop, drop, and roll is what you do when you catch on fire, and somebody else will be administering the fire blanket. These are safety goggles or glasses. They're the primary protectors intended to shield your eyes against liquid or chemical splashes, irritating mists, vapors, and fumes that are in the lab. So there's a variety of different styles that you will see over the course of your life in science. We have the glasses, not the goggles. This is the eye wash station. It's a unit for washing chemicals or substances that might splash into an individual's eyes before you can seek further medical attention. So if you end up needing to use the eye wash station, you're going to need to keep your eyes on there. It says here for at least 15 minutes, but if you are sent to the eye wash station, you will actually keep washing your eye until the paramedics arrive. So do not take off your eyes from the eye wash station until medical help, either the nurse or the paramedics, come to my classroom. This is the chemical emergency shower. It's used as a form of emergency first aid aimed at limiting the effects of accidental exposure to harmful materials. So it's in the back of the room. If you get chemicals on you, you have to take your chemical spilled clothing off and you have to stay underneath this shower until medical help arrives. There's two different kinds of balances that we have. We have a triple beam balance and an electric scale. The triple beam balance and the electric scale both provides measurement of weight. The beam scales use two platforms. One is for the object being weighed, and the other, it has metal ceramic weights for measurement of known measurements. And you would weigh them until they're equal on both sides of the platform, and you have to compute the amount of weight that you add up on the triple beam balance. The electronic scale offers a digital alternative to that. It uses a single platform and an electric sensor, and then it displays the specimen on the weight of it on an LCD display. Both items are fairly expensive, so we don't put chemicals directly on either of the pans, and we're careful never to use the electric scale with any liquids. So we don't weigh liquids on electric scale. If we need to know the mass of the liquid, we have to do calculations with density. So we won't put liquids on the electric scale. All right. Hopefully you will pick the right piece of equipment when necessary.